Hello everyone, happy Friday. Jackie Edwards here. I just had an interesting experience with my team and in my business today. So I thought it was a great learning point for my team because I've got quite a few new team members. And I thought I would share it with all of you because it's probably an interesting thing that some of you may not have thought about. Now, this is really specifically related to your HMO tenants and how you protect their data. So how we rent our properties is we rent them by the room. So each tenant moves in and they've got their own tenancy agreement, so they don't all come in as a group and move in all together. They've got their single tenancy agreement on their room as a whole. So they generally don't know all of their other housemates when they move in. Now this means that, we've got a duty to basically treat them like we would treat tenants that were living in completely separate houses that, don't know each other at all. So if we've got a house over here on this street and a house over here on this street, we would never share those tenants' information. So we would never tell Joe tenant over here what Fred's email address or phone number is. It's the same thing in your HMOs if you're renting them out on a room to people that don't already know each other. So for instance, if Fred calls and says, hey, I need Joe's phone number, Joe's parked behind me and I'm late for work, then you really can't give him Joe's phone number. You can say, all right, I can call Joe or I can text Joe and see if we can get a hold of him to move. But no, we can't give you Joe's information because that would be violating his kind of data protection. And especially with GDPR coming in, and if you're not familiar with that, you should check out my article that was in last month's YPN magazine. I think that was, or is it this month's? So I think it's February, either January or February 2018. I wrote an article with some helpful tips about GDPR, which is the new data protection regulations that are coming in May. But we need to take data protection really seriously for our tenants. If Joe wants to give Fred his contact details, he can give it to him kind of in person and they can talk about it. But we as a team and as his landlords and agents, we can't give out their personal data to people that they haven't given us permission to. So what we had happen today, which was quite interesting, I won't go into too much detail because it was all a little bit crazy and surreal, is we basically had a situation in one of our house shares where a tenant thought that one of the other male tenants had given flowers to his wife. So he was super upset because somebody had given, flowers to his wife. So he thought somebody was hitting on his wife, basically. So he called us super upset and he wanted to get the phone number and the contact details for this other guy because he's like, it must have been that guy. I've been living with these other people for ages. He's the newest one. It must have been him. And I was like, well, are you sure it was him? And he's like, no, but it must be him. And I was like, well, I can't give you his information, but, what else would you like me to do? And he's like, well, you need to email him then and tell him that that's not appropriate. So another little lesson in customer service that I find quite helpful is to kind of push this back on the tenant. So he was saying, you, Jackie, you need to do this and do this and do this. And I was honestly a little bit confused as to what was going on because I couldn't quite understand what was happening. And he was adamant that it was this guy, and I was like, but you don't know. And he was like, and the little note wasn't signed that guy's name. And I was like, well, are you sure it's what you think it is? And he's like, yes, it must be that guy, or maybe it's that guy. I was like, and he's like, you should send them both a message and say not to do that. And I was asking, well, what do you think I should actually say in this message? And he's like, I don't know. I was like, well, you need to decide what this message should say, and I have to send it to the whole house, not just to those two guys, because you don't know for sure it was one of them, and I'm not going to send them a message blaming them for it if we don't know who it was. So I'll send a message to the entire house. You let me know what you wanted to say. Well, of course he couldn't come up with anything to say because I don't know, what do you say in this situation? And I kept telling him, maybe you should talk to, your housemates and see what's happening. And I was like, and also, are you sure it's one of the guys and not one of the other girls living in the house, that maybe she talked to your wife and they were talking about flowers and she happened to find some and thought your wife might like them? And he's like, oh, why would they do that? I was like, well, girls do like flowers and they tend to do those things. So I was like, maybe you should check. Well, right then, his other female housemate came in and explained to him that she had left the flowers for his wife and thought it would be a nice thing to do. So the whole problem was solved, but it was just a good learning experience, because I had to tell my team, really important, that, when a tenant calls like this, because he had initially called my new team member and she didn't know what to do. So I said, when somebody asks for their housemate's contact details, we can't give them out. We can't give out phone numbers. We can't give out email addresses. If they want to exchange them, maybe they want to put them up on their notice board, that's fine. Or if we have them sign a piece of paper, so if part of our contract included a clause that said, you're okay with us posting your phone number and your email address on the notice board or giving them to your housemates, then we probably could. But we don't include that in our contract. We just, as a policy, don't give out our tenants' personal details to even their other housemates. So I just wanted to share that with you so that you can kind of think that through and apply it in your own property businesses, especially with your HMO tenants, because this has happened quite a bit before, where a tenant has called me and said, oh, I need the contact details for so-and-so in room number 2. And I've had to say, look, we can't give you those details, but I can send them a message, or I can ask them if they're happy for me to pass their details on to you. The same thing, we've had this happen with potential new tenants that are moving in. So we get a lot of new tenants that are coming from maybe Europe, and they don't have desks, and they don't have all of the kit that they need. And then we'll have tenants that are living in the property that are leaving, and they're going back to Europe. So they've bought stuff while they're here that they want to be able to get rid of easily and quickly. So they tell me, hey, why don't you just give me the email address of the new tenant that's moving in, and I'll see if he wants my desk, or I'll see if he wants my bike. And again, I can't give him their email address without getting their permission in writing first, or kind of acting as a go-between in the middle before that, because again, I can't give that tenant's, that person's personal contact details, their personal data, to anybody else without their express permission. So just think of that as you run your business, and even if you've asked verbally, make sure you get it all in writing, just so that you're covered, and just try not to share other people's data as much as possible. They are tenants, they are adults, they can kind of talk to each other in their houses and work it out themselves. So hopefully that was helpful for you. It was a great learning lesson for my team this morning. So I just wanted to share it and say, have a wonderful weekend. I hope the sun is shining wherever you are, and I will see you again next week.